looking around to see who's sleepy. I heard some of you talking last night, and I hope you got your rest. Some of you slept through this morning's meditation. No problem. It wasn't an obligation. But you missed some of the very good questions that came up following. We had a bit of an impromptu chat, and so I think that might be a good place to start. The question was put on the spiritual path, what's the value of a psychic reading? Right? Because the understanding of the questioner was on every traditional spiritual path, whether it's Hinduism or some form of yogic philosophy, Buddhism, and even in Jainism and mystical Christianity and these things, is there's a recognition that extrasensory experiences will occur. So paranormal experiences, visions, visitations, right? We only have to look as far as the Christian Bible and see it's populated with prophets, right? And people being visited by angels and otherworldly beings. But yet at the same time, it cautions against seeking the counsel of seers and mystics. Seems a bit of a contradiction, right? Is that you have many, many accounts of different prophets and people communing with angels and otherwise, people who have perhaps come back from the dead. And then it says, oh, by the way, don't talk to anyone who can supply that service for you. So it seems to be a bit of a bait and switch, right? So I think the question as we explored this as a small group this morning was, where does extrasensory perception exist on the spiritual path? In the Southeast Asian traditions, these are called siddhis, Siddhi or Siddhi, siddhi, right? Siddhi describes mystical powers. Okay. Without going into a long dissertation about navigating the astral world, which I probably should at some point with you, we want to look at the use of extrasensory perception as a tool, an instrument, something that can be used to relieve suffering, not create an identity. This is important. In traditional religion, the going to a seer or a psychic or something, it's thought to be demonic, that, someone will fill someone else's head with the ramblings of some demonic entity that is communicating through an unscrupulous person, right? So we've all heard that trope. And perhaps there can be some truth to it, but really the fear is that the individual going to the seer, the mystic, the psychic, the healer, will begin to deify that individual and using their knowledge or service as a way to avoid cultivating an inner relationship with the divine, where God makes itself known to you in a personal way. So that's the risk, is that listening to some ill-informed psychic or mystic might distract you or prevent you from the truth. And the truth in the context of the early Christians, or even the Judaic culture pre-existing Christianity, was that there was more than one God, more than one single source of creation and ultimately divine wisdom and salvation, right? So we have to look at the roots of the Judaic Christian path to understand, this is a monotheist paradigm. And this is not taking a position against it. I'm just pointing to the cultural context where if there is only one divine source of creation, answers, support, truth, right, then we don't want to go looking for some other human being's interpretation of, they're acting as a divine channel, because it's been predetermined that there may only be one true prophet, or it's the priest class, etc. Right? So we want to stay as close to the well as possible so that there's little time for the water to be spoiled. In indigenous cultures or shamanic cultures, these pre-industrial or pre-agriculture communities, is there wasn't just one creator. There were water spirits, there were spirits of the air, there were fire spirits, there was the great spirit, there was the mother earth and the father sky. You see where I'm going with this. It's all of these different concepts to explain why the world is the way it is and who we are in relationship to it. Who we are in relationship to the unseen is really the point, because our experience of self manifests only in relationships, right? So your sense of identity is created out of a relationship, right? Think about this. In relationship to your parents, you experience yourself as a son or daughter. In relationship to a partner, you're a spouse or lover. In relationship to a child, you're a parent or guardian, right? With mentors, you're a student. With a boss, you are an employee. But if you begin to project onto that boss your issues around parenthood and the resentment you had toward your parent and the influence or control you felt they had over your life, well, then your relationship to your boss suddenly feels very personal and triggering. So keeping the relationships straight, understanding who we are in every context, is critical to not only healthy development as an individual and an ability to not just survive but thrive, but also to understand who we are in a world that ultimately is non-physical and spiritual, because we don't live in the quote real world. We live by and large in relationship to our perception of the world. In essence, each and every one of us is living a reaction to our thinking. Rather, I should say, our thinking creates feelings, and then we react to those feelings, or we project those feelings outward, contaminating our relationships or changing them. Or in the instances of any repressed, unresolved issue. We have feelings, emotions lodged within our nervous system, and those inspire thinking, which distorts our interpretation of our relationships and the world going on around us. So, what I'm really pointing to is each of us lives in an individual universe that is in reaction to the way that we think. So, how is extrasensory perception helpful? Extrasensory perception is helpful in that the psychic forces that we work with, what does it mean to be, what is psychic energy? Anyone? See, I know we covered this. I see a lot of blank faces. Psychic energy are the mental and emotional emanations of conscious beings. Right? So it's mental and emotional energy. And in those energies are patterns of information that we give meaning to. So spiritual practice is necessary among psychic practitioners because it keeps you clear. It keeps you from personalizing the psychic emanations of your clients or other beings. It prevents you from defining the emotional and mental emanations of others through a filter of your hurts, your unmet needs, your desires, your wants, your belief system. So extrasensory perception, when wielded by a skillful practitioner with a devoted spiritual practice and an open-hearted desire to serve, not proselytize, is helpful because it allows the practitioner to see into the aura of others, and that information encoded within the aura is past, present, and future, alternate timelines, etc. We'll go no farther than that. And download the contents, process it, and then communicate it back to the client unfiltered or unspoiled, I should say. So many people come to psychics because they find themselves in a place where they're just overwhelmed or confused or feeling triggered or don't know what to do, or they've got themselves in this place where they think, gosh, if I do this, that's not what I want. And if I do that, well, that's not going to work either. The individual seeking service is perplexed because the world that they've created within their mind, the universe within which they're living, feels as if it's constricting or caving in on them or not showing them a way forward where they can live and be who they imagine they should be. It doesn't feel good. And then because they're oriented outward, a feedback loop of I can't do this, I want that, I need this, but I don't know how to do it. And maybe I don't deserve it, and maybe I'm just, not a good person or something like this. It generates this kind of worry and anxiety and confusion and panic, and all of it is because they're responding to the conditioning of their thinking mind, not with reality as it actually is, because reality is always expanding and changing. It's the mind that is stagnant. And when the mind is stagnant, it limits the experience of our being. And that brings about suffering. This is why it's very important that when you are seeking to spiritually serve others using extrasensory perception, that you don't focus on confirming your identity by saying, look what I can do. I see this, I see that, and then solicit the client to readily say yes, 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 yes. Because what you're doing is you are going into their aura, which is populated with information that they've imagined, that they think, that they feel, that they believe, what's happened to them, the way they've interpreted their relationships, what they've read, watched, seen on TV, the argument they had with their boss, their mom, their friend, the hurt. All of these things that people believe to be real, when perhaps they're not, they're only real from the point of view that they cause them to feel something significant. And if, as a practitioner, you just say, I see this and I see that, and they say, yes, 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 you're using that person's experience to confirm your identity as a psychic. And by default, you are, in fact, confirming for the client everything perhaps they fear. Their incorrect worldview is also ultimately real. And that's a disservice. So the way extrasensory perception can be extremely valuable is to see these things, the contents of another's aura, with compassion, to see it for what it is, to understand why it is and why it's there and how it causes suffering, not to deny it, not to pretend that it's not real. It feels very real, and it has or can have real consequences, whatever the instance is or the feeling is that you're observing in that aura. But when you don't use that information to confirm your identity, and instead you are open-heartedly observing the contents of another's aura as simply just information about what your client is going through, you can separate the wheat from the chaff. You can see the way they've organized their individual universe, but you can also see beyond it. The thing about thinking is that most thinking is just an opinion, it's a perspective. Most things that are just accepted as valid can be argued or broken down into constituent parts, or there are opposing points of view. Therefore, most thoughts aren't implicitly real. The thinking, the point of view, the vantage point that clients have about their world only seems real because it is a framework that provides for them an identity so they know that they are real. But the human experience is just the very tip of the spear. It's where awareness is pointed and activated. Right? All of these things create the identity, and then people are saddled with this identity, and that influences how they perceive themselves in the world and how the world is to them. Psychic work, therefore, is something a lot more valuable than talking about otherworldly beings, invisible beings, altered states of consciousness. Extrasensory perception ultimately becomes a method for changing lives, to helping people achieve, to help people overcome the burden of who they've been told they are, so they can free the experience of who they authentically are. And then miracles can happen. Restoration of physical well-being, restoration of psychological well-being, restoration of emotional well-being, increase in earning potentials. We are limitless beings. And my goal in working with you all is to show you how to get out of the way and be a channel for the limitless. Ultimately, those who you will serve will know the power of eternal being only in response to your selflessness and your love. I'll take a question or two on that.